Welcome back, viewers. I'm on with Carl Greenidge. He is advisor on borders to Guyana. We were discussing the territorial controversy between Venezuela and Guyana. That's before the ICJ right now. He is also the agent for Guyana to the court. Welcome back. More than 3/4 of a nation's sovereign territory based on what you have outlined, what others have outlined about the Malaprevos document, is a very weak position. But President Maduro is taking a very hard and strong line on this, on some very weak position. It's a bit hard to reconcile because he seems to have put himself in a box where he's placed Venezuela now with the referendum, with claiming sovereignty over Essequibo after the referendum, basically annexing the territory on paper, that it seems that he's taking a very hard line on something that the court is unlikely to rule in Venezuela's favor, and also alienating himself in the Venezuela, and also risking attracting more sanctions in the international community. So it's hard to understand why it's going that, especially when former President Hugo Chavez is credited as dismissing this matter as some sort of imperialistic agenda that he's come to this point. Any insights there?
Well, I'm not sure I have insights, but often when your position is weak, in the Caribbean we have an expression, certainly in Guyana, of being wrong and strong. So if you have a weak case, the perhaps most effective way of ensuring that it isn't examined minutely is to change, not so much change the goalpost, but to switch the argument altogether. So now, instead of talking about the basis upon which Venezuela claimed to have abandoned an agreement that they signed and honored for 63 years, you suddenly have assertions about Venezuelan ownership of territory, the Venezuelan delegation providing to the court information about what President Trump said, about what Mr. Blinken said, about what happened to who criticized Venezuela left, right, and center, as though that has any relevance whatsoever to the issue. It is mostly, like the allegation of several Malaprevos, irrelevant. The thing that I would draw to your attention and ask you to reflect on is this. Malaprevos' allegation was made, supposedly his allegation was made a matter of a month or so after he had been given a Venezuelan national award. Okay? And secondly, when he made, or when the document was published, when he is supposed to have read the allegations to his colleagues in his office, he asked that the allegations be not published until after his death. By the time the document is supposed to have been written, in any case, all the people that he accused and all of those who were participants in the events of 1907, 1905, 1899, and 1897, all were dead. So there was nobody available who could deal with the matters firsthand and refute them. And that was his intention. Now, why would you do that? Why would you do that? And why would a country mobilize an army with the intention of killing people? With the intention of killing people, innocent and completely unrelated to this exercise, based upon such an allegation. This is the.
You mentioned that the Venezuelans have presented before the court quotes from Donald Trump. What's his relevance in this? What's the currency that they're spending there with Donald Trump?
Kalistra, I am putting to you, as they say here, I give you as I get it. I sell it as I buy it. This
Okay.
is what was presented to the court as a complaint when the court, when they made their presentation in respect to the matter on which the court has already now ruled. So I'm not telling you anything secret here. The
Okay,
presentation which
which
was
is
published.
the issue of jurisdiction.
No, this was when we were looking at the um, 15th, 12th, 14th and 15th of December, looking at Guyana's complaint about Venezuela um, acting improperly by threatening to annex our territory and issuing ID cards to people, these sorts of things. At that time, when Venezuela was asked to make its case, it contended, amongst other things, a whole set of things about Guyana's links with the U.S., about Exxon, about President Trump's statements. You ask me what is the relevance, and I say to you, I'm no wiser than you are in that regard.
Because Venezuela was I believe they were making the point also. I recall now. I think that the proximity to Venezuela and the presence of the of U.S. interests there, and so on. I believe there was
But
some
but, but
conversation about that.
eh, he is saying, am I to assume that Venezuela has a right to determine what foreign investment takes place in any other country? Exxon, until they fell out in 2006 with Venezuela, was a close partner on the commercial side in Venezuela. And let me say, what more relevant than the proximity of Exxon to to uh, to uh, to Venezuela is the fact that Caracas is over 1,000 kilometers from Guyana's border with Venezuela. And what is more, the people that you would have expected to complain would be Suriname. The work of Exxon is being undertaken 86 kilometers from the border with Suriname. 86 kilometers or thereabouts from the borders with Suriname. Why would you think that Venezuela somehow has a reasonable right to pronounce on what takes place there, so far from Venezuela's borders and so far from Caracas itself? This is overreach. This is overreach. You are purporting now to tell a country what its foreign relations can be, with whom it can speak, what commercial enterprises it can have in its country. We have never sought to tell Venezuela, and we wouldn't even think about it, with whom to have commercial links. When the US has difficulty with Venezuela and its commercial links, Venezuela says the US is interfering in their internal matters. I don't know that this is any different.
There's also the argument though that the position that President Maduro is currently taking may be related to his domestic issues. He's facing a presidential election. His domestic position is said to be weak, and that this is some sort of attempt to wrap Venezuelans in the flag and to distract from his own issues and his political weakness as well. And that this is just stirring up smoke and mirrors, really, and using that situation for. I know that you cannot speak for Maduro and maybe given the position you hold, but I'm still putting it to you if you care to comment on that.
Well, this is a widely held view, and we find it uh, perhaps um, a view that is feasible. The information that we have, as I say, historically, Venezuela has no claim at all to the Essequibo. The Essequibo's languages, its culture, its evolution since 1648, when that region was taken over by the Dutch or the United Provinces, which is what Spain gave them independence, along with the three colonies of Demerara, Essequibo, and Berbice. There's no reason to believe that this is anything more than an idiosyncratic attempt to grab territory. And it is worrying because when we speak to a lot of allies and people abroad, they can't understand why would a country be fighting for a territory which is a tiny fraction of their own land. Essequibo surely is a place with much by way of mineral resources, but those mineral resources, if you take gold, oil, diamonds, are a small fraction of what Venezuela is known to have and has been exploiting over the years. So why would you put people's lives at risk to get an additional shekel? It is puzzling, if not irresponsible. And that is the situation. We find it hard to believe. Now there is a dimension which may also be why Brazil is interested, or why Brazil we would expect it to be interested, as it was interested before. The Essequibo runs the full length of Guyana. The Essequibo runs the full length of Guyana, from north to south. And two or three of its main tributaries run east-west. And therefore that is a very important artery of Guyana. It's a commercial artery. Without access to the Essequibo River, the British and Dutch, or the Dutch initially, because that is where the capital was set up, would not have been able to explore the southwest and a good deal of Guyana. Now, that is one side. It gives you access to much of the country, but the origin of the Essequibo is a few miles away from Guyana's border with Brazil. It is also a few miles away from Guyana's border with Suriname. So if Venezuela could somehow lay hands on that river, as if I might use that expression, it would now be a very strategic player in what is happening, or what could happen, in both Suriname and Brazil. And I have no doubt that, given the influence of the military in the administration, that that is partly what is driving it today to go to these extremes in claiming territory that was never Venezuela's. In fact, I would say to you that part of the absurdity of the argument of Venezuela is that the territory of Essequibo was given to Venezuela, and it was given to Venezuela when, in 1495, the Pope gave that territory, or carved up that territory between Portugal and Spain. But the fact is that the territory was apportioned under that arrangement, not to Venezuela at all, but to Spain. Venezuela was a colony. It was Spain that signed an agreement with the United Provinces, that is the Netherlands and Luxembourg, in 1648 to get its independence. And in getting its independence, the United Provinces' independence from Spain, it acquired Essequibo, Demerara, and Berbice. And those three territories have never been ruled separately. In 1648, Berbice, which is where I come from, Berbice was given to a family to manage, as in that time it was common for states to hand trading companies rights to operate in these areas. And the other two, which at one stage were managed jointly as the Two Rivers. That was what the colony was called. First of all, Essequibo, then it was Two Rivers, then after, and only after, the Dutch lost, together with the French, the Napoleonic Wars, the three territories were ruled by Britain and then united administratively. So the idea that this territory had at some stage been separately governed and managed by Venezuela is untrue. It is untrue. It has always been managed by the Dutch West India Company or by the Dutch as a whole, and then by the British. And the idea that somehow Venezuela has been uh, denied a right that it inherited is untrue. It never inherited that right. And as I say, from the languages, if you look at this, Essequibo had a Creole. The Creole has not a single iota of Spanish in it. The Creole died in the 1990s. Berbice, where I come from, has also a Creole, but it was different from that of Essequibo, but it shared the same characteristics. It was overwhelmingly Dutch and with African, probably more than normal compared with the rest of the Caribbean, more than normal African words in the vocabulary. So the culture of this part of Guyana is consistent with that of the rest of Guyana. It bears no relationship whatsoever to um, the, the culture in that sense of Venezuela. And as regards the indigenous people, let me just say to you that the professed link between Venezuela and the indigenous people of Guyana is an ethnic link. It's no different from the link with Suriname or elsewhere. But the difference between the Spanish um, um, territories and Guyana is that during the time, I don't know if you ever saw the film called The Mission. You may be too young to know that. There was a film called The
The
Mission.
mission,
Yes,
who's
it's a very
starring in
famous
that?
film. Well, don't ask me. I'm not a film buff.
What year was that? Because I
It
did see,
was
for instance, Island in the Sun. I didn't get to see that later on. So don't rule me out. Don't rule me out.
no, I was not really. I saw it, but that was only by luck because I'm not a film buff. But I happen to know that the mission was about the process by which the Spaniards and Portuguese tried to manage the indigenous Indians whose lands they were given by the Pope. Now you hear Mr. Maduro saying all sorts of things. He's interested in looking after the welfare of Indians. Let me say to you that Guyana's indigenous population, unlike that anywhere else in the region, has actually increased at, from the 17th to the 20th century. The reason for that increase was not a natural increase alone. It was because many of them that eventually ended up in Guyana were running from being um, rounded up and put in Christian missions in the Spanish territory and the Portuguese territories. That is how come Guyana benefited from the movement of indigenous people into its land. So the idea that Venezuela, as part of that old Spanish Empire, has the interest and always had the interest of indigenous Indians at heart is a joke. It is not true. The historical record shows something very different. And that is why I refer you to the mission, because the story of the mission was very much about that flight of the indigenous people, their destruction by Luciphone and related forces, and how they ended up trying to escape the carnage that usually followed the process of putting them in Christian missions um, in this part of the world.
We'll take another break here. I'm on with Carl Greenidge, advisor on borders for Guyana. We're discussing the Venezuela-Guyana territorial controversy that involves three-quarters, or more than three-quarters, they say, of Guyana's territory in the resource-rich Essequibo region. We'll be right back.